A very warm welcome back to the Football Martin podcast. Very special episode this midweek for you because I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, somebody that knows the EFL inside out. Gab Sutton is joining me here on the Football Martin show because I want to get a little bit of an insight into a man that Southampton Football Club have been linked with, not just now, but back in January as well. Danny Rohl of Sheffield Wednesday looks like he's set to become the manager of Southampton Football Club this summer, because it does look like they will part ways with their current manager, Ivan Juric, once the season ends. Gab, welcome along to the Football Martin channel. It's great to have you here. It's weird actually to be in the hot seat asking you the questions because it's usually around the other way. I spend a lot of time jumping on your shows. Let everybody know, where can they find you? If they've not seen you before, Gab, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can drop me a follow on Twitter at Gab Sutton, or X as it's now called. And we also have the Championship podcasts on Mondays at 5:30, which unfortunately for Saints fans you might become familiar with next season. And sadly with the way the season's gone for you lot. But yeah, Twitter Gab Sutton, and for the podcast, which is also available on YouTube and on Spotify, that's hashtag EFL Debate.
Yeah, make sure you go follow Gab. I will leave all of his handles and accounts in the show notes below, so be sure to give one of those a hit. Go give him a follow. The Monday show is absolutely brilliant. I'll be looking forward to joining you on it once again next season when we'll be talking about Southampton, no doubt. Gab, we've been linked with a man that's done very well in the Championship this season. He's done very well last season actually as well. Let's talk about Danny Rohl. Can I get some thoughts on him? You watch the EFL a lot more than what I've seen it this season. What sort of job has he done at Sheffield Wednesday?
Yeah, I think he's done a phenomenal job. I would completely understand for Southampton fans that maybe don't follow much beyond your own team, which, why would you? You're sort of thinking, well, we're appointing, the manager of 12th place Sheffield Wednesday. Sheffield Wednesday are a big club in the Championship. Should that be a huge achievement? But the context of that is when he took charge at Sheffield Wednesday, they were, I don't even know how many points adrift they were. It was September or maybe October. It'd been an absolute disaster under Xisco Munoz, and he managed to stabilise things and get some results, and it was top half form, borderline playoff form almost between then and the end of the season, certainly with really good January recruitment, and that kept Sheffield Wednesday up. So yeah, he did an incredible job, and then this season he's been able to implement a bit more of his maybe idealistic sort of approach, and I think that's one sort of feather in his cap, that on the one hand this season he's been able to build a sort of a really creative side that plays sort of on the front foot, that has very clear in possession shape as well, and I'm sure I'll go on to talk about that, but also last season he also recognised what was needed to get Sheffield Wednesday out of trouble, and I think that shows a real strength as well, something that's maybe been criticised of former Southampton managers. So yeah, I think you've got I think probably the best manager in the Championship, unless Kieran McKenna comes down with Ipswich and stays there, in which case it be close. But yeah, I really like Danny Rohl. I think he's got a huge future. Wouldn't surprise me. Lots of variables that will dictate whether he actually goes on to do this, because football's such an unpredictable sport. I think he's got the potential at least to go on and win a Champions League with Bayern Munich or win a World Cup with Germany. I really do see his potential being that high. So I think you'll have yourselves an excellent appointment if you pull it off.
Yeah, there'll be no doubt there'll be loads of clubs in for him, not just in England, but back in Germany, his homeland as well. He's a very, very well sought after manager. The last 2 years he's had with Wednesday, like you said, he made them hard to beat last year, and they started to get results. What did he do last season when he went in there, do you feel?
Yeah, I think it firstly sort of motivated people, and then which I think is huge, because he has a real charisma about him. He has that ability to really bring people together, and I think that's huge. But then also I think he recognised that some of his ideas he had to sort of shelve for that immediate short term. And then what I really like about his work this season is they play with a 4-2-3-1, but they have a very clear in possession shape, whereby they basically they play a 3-2-5 in possession, where they always have
Okay.
a back three in possession, whether that's two centre backs and a fullback tucking in or a midfielder dropping in. They always have two midfielders in possession, and they always
Mm.
have a five-man attack, whether that composes of an attacking midfielder or one of the wingers or well, probably both the wingers, but one of the fullbacks. So it's hard to explain, but basically, it'll always be initially a 3-2-5 build-up shape, pretty much,
Mm.
and the actual composition of it can fluctuate and can change, and that's what I really like about the work Danny Rohl has done, because it means that on the one hand you have this really clear patterns of play where everybody knows their roles and responsibility, but on the other
Mm.
hand it's not regimented. There's a flexibility within it that can keep opposing teams guessing, and I think
Mm.
that's a real sweet spot that lots of managers try and sometimes fail to look for in terms of that balance between being regimented and having that individual expression. And I think Danny Rohl's hit that sweet spot on the nose. So that's what I really like about his work from a coaching perspective.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching them, and I've watched Wednesday this year, and I watched them last week. I was impressed with them. I thought they were really good. I was impressed with the young Shay Charles that's come from Southampton. They've took him on loan this year. He looks like a manager actually that develops players as well. Because to me, Charles looks like he's kicked on this season under Roll.
What do you think? I'd love to sort of throw this back to you, Martin. Do you think he's because what I wonder is in terms of improving the defensive side of things, like for me, Shay Charles, he looks a lot stronger and a lot tougher defensively
Yeah.
than I'd seen from him under Russ Martin. And I wondered
Mm.
if there was a bit of a naivety about his game in the 23-24 campaign for your lot that maybe under
Mm.
somebody like Rohl, maybe that's less the case because he's sort of been learnt the defensive side of things that he maybe hasn't been taught previously.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely. I think without any questions, he's toughened up this year. He looks like a player that looks a bit more physical than he did, and I think
Yeah.
it's who he's partnered with in that role in midfield as well. Like he played centre back for us a few times last year, but he didn't look quite comfortable playing it. I didn't think he played next to Bednarik a couple of times. Howard Bellis was still he was settling himself into the football club, and it took him a while to kind of settle in and become the defender that he become last season. I didn't think central defence was where we needed him last year. We needed him to step in, and he's always stepping in when Downs was injured, and then in the end, Russell Martin didn't really trust him enough, and maybe didn't believe in his ability enough, and didn't get the best out of him. And in the end, he kept finding other players to play in the role, and in the end, he just. I think he maybe lost his confidence. There's a big confidence issue with him as well, Shay Charles.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I think Royals definitely. I mean, it's always hard to tell, isn't it, from an observational capacity, Martin? And to some
Mm.
extent, you play in guessing games, but just based on the pure volume of players that Danny Royal seems to be able to improve, because that's the other thing that I would come back to. Sheffield Wednesday being mid-table in the Championship, I can
Mm.
totally see why there might be some
Mm.
Southampton fans watching this and sort of not quite being able to add it up. Like I'm talking about Royal having this huge world-class future, and yet he's managing a
Mm.
team that's Sheffield Wednesday mid-table in the Championship. That's quite a normal position for them in terms of the size of club. However, Danny Rohl is having to deal with massive ownership issues where Dave Chansiri either doesn't communicate or his communication isn't proved to be reliable. He's massively at odds with the fans in terms of communication, in terms of ticket prices and things like that. There's a real cloud hanging over. No investment in infrastructure. That's another thing. January, they desperately needed a centre half. Since then, they've had to play Max Lowe, who I think is a 5'5" left back at centre half because they didn't bring one in when they needed to. And so all these things mean that it's very difficult. I don't think it's a very good squad for Sheffield Wednesday. I think it's a bottom six squad on paper. They've got Barry Bannon, fair enough, but he's massively developed players like Masaba and particularly Gassama, who's been one of the standout players for Sheffield Wednesday this season, a really quick winger. But I think it's just, I watched them with my own eyes against Millwall in January, and what I really liked about his team was that they had a shape about them, and because they had a consistent in possession shape, it meant that when the ball got turned over, players sort of knew what they had to do because they knew their roles and responsibilities, and so they weren't as vulnerable to to counterattacks and turnovers as maybe Southampton were under the previous manager. So I think that's a really big thing. And then the other thing is they don't sort of panic and shoot from outside the box. They back themselves to create those clear-cut chances based on the way they play. So again, I really like Danny Rohl, and I think if you put him at a club with real foundations and a brilliant structure around him, I think he could do some great things.
Yeah, no, that's what excites me. And a lot of Southampton fans are looking at it, and they're saying what you're saying. Mid-table Wednesday side. I said that they were kind of almost within the playoff mix, and somebody said, "Well, they're not," but they were. They were at the start of January, but when the window opened, they were well and truly in the mix. He probably didn't get back like he wanted to be backed in that window, and a lot of the Wednesday fans were frustrated, Gab, weren't they? Because if they, like you said, brought a centre, they needed a centre back big time, and they've picked up injuries since. They're now a little bit thin.
Yeah, exactly. I off the top of my head, so forgive me if I don't get this wrong. Feel free, if you're watching this, to go and check. But I don't think they signed hardly anyone in January other than converting Shea Charles, other than keeping Shea Charles. So that's so he didn't really have much support where other clubs around Sheffield Wednesday were able to strengthen. So you got that issue at central defence. You've also got an issue up top. They don't really have a proper striker. Ike Ugbo's really struggled for confidence this season. So again, there's lots of aspects of the Sheffield Wednesday squad that are less than ideal. And I also think those centre back issues mean that from what I've seen, I don't think it's that Sheffield Wednesday are like wide open. They've conceded a few goals, but I would say that's more been down to individual errors, partly because of maybe the personnel they've had at the back. Not like they've got somebody like Michael Ihikwe at centre half, who I think is a League One defender. I don't think he's any good at this level. I think they signed him for League One, and he sort of stayed with them, and he sort of stayed for due to them not signing somebody else. But again, I think it's more been individual errors as opposed to them necessarily being carved open. Whereas, even I look at the promotion winning squad that you had. I've not had the chance to see much of you in the Premier League, which I'm not sure I've missed an awful lot.
No, I haven't missed anything at all.
But I did feel like in the Championship, I even though you did go promoted, and fair enough, I didn't really trust Southampton defensively. Whereas
64 goals are conceded, like throughout including the playoff campaign. 63 league goals. It's a huge amount to concede, isn't it? As a side that were vowing to be title contenders.
100%, and I think that if you put Danny Rohl in a squad with better individual defenders, I think they'd actually be quite good defensively. It's just that with Sheffield Wednesday, they've had bad individual defenders.
Yeah, I'm looking at Leeds. They've only conceded 22 goals this season. In fourth place, Sunderland this year, only 32 they've conceded, and they're in fourth, and it just shows that we were just way too leaky. Do you think if Rohl was to become the Southampton manager, do you think he'd defensively get Saints solid or far more solid?
I think he'd give you a lovely balance between being creative and forward-looking in possession, but also knowing what to do when the ball gets turned over. So when I saw you in the Championship, it felt like because you were so possession-heavy, it was like your whole game plan was focused on what you were going to do with the ball. And there was just simply no plan at all for what happened out of possession. And I think it can be a bit used as a bit of an excuse for managers saying, oh, we're just going to focus on what we do. We're going to focus on making, perfecting plan A. But the reality is football isn't like that. But, even if you have an extreme possession-heavy style of football, you're still going to be at risk of losing the ball sometimes, and then you've got to have a backup plan, for when that happens. And I think the best managers, I look at somebody like Kieran McKenna. The reason for me why Ipswich have been more competitive in the Premier League is that I think Kieran McKenna gets that balance right between yes, we've got a vision for how we're going to create chances in possession, but we also know everyone knows what they're going to do when we don't have the ball. And I think that balance is really important. And I think Danny Rohl's going to help with that.
Yeah, no, I'm excited by the potential of Danny Rohl. Southampton totally changed from a manager that wanted to be possession based and tried to do it in the Premier League and got massively. It just didn't work. It was obvious it was never going to work with the caliber of players that he had. You're playing against world-class centre forwards, midfielders, and football games are won in midfield by really good midfielders, aren't they? And we just couldn't. We've not been able to deal with the Premier League, not been able to deal with the physicality of it, the speed of it, the pace of it, and it's been a real eye opener this season. And the gap is becoming really big, isn't it? Let's talk about the gap between the two divisions, between the Championship and the Premier League. From what you're seeing as somebody that's watching the Championship and the EFL a lot, they talk about the gap between the Championship and League One, but getting bigger and bigger. Do you think the gaps between the divisions are becoming really big?
Yeah, it seems like it's increasingly difficult for clubs promoted from the Championship to stay in the Premier League, and it feels like it's becoming increasingly easy for clubs coming down from the Premier League to be competitive near the top. Other than Luton, I suppose, would be the counter to that, but Burnley and Sheffield United, because the individual quality of Sheffield United and the defensive solidity of Burnley, they've been right at the top and above, kind of, because at the moment in the Championship you've got kind of a group of 4 really strong teams, a bit like last season, and then below that it's kind of anyone's guess really for the playoffs. So yeah, and then there's obviously 2 parachute clubs in that 4, along with Leeds, who you'd sort of expect they had parachute payments sort of the second year, if you like.
Second year round, yeah.
Exactly. And then there always seems to be one surprise, like Ipswich were last year, and Sunderland are probably this year the team that kind of goes against the parachute teams. But that seems to be you only tend to get 1 or 2 of those teams rather than lots of those sides.
I was chatting to someone about it yesterday, and we were saying, do you think there'd be an instance where you get a non-parachute payment team promoted to the Premier League and able to stay in it? There's not a team done it. Well, I think just looking at Forest did it, and not that long ago, but they spent a lot of money when they got promoted. Yeah. And then we've had who else? We had Brentford do it. But other than that, I'm trying to think outside the box. There's not many teams that are non. Yeah, there's not loads that do it, is there? Non-parachute payment teams.
No, Brighton didn't come up until 2017, so it kind of backs up that argument that it's difficult for clubs coming up to really survive at that level without having the parachute. So you almost need to go up and miss out on staying up, and then come back down with some of the resources, and then rebuild from there.
Yeah, looking at the Championship this season, it's like you say, you talk about those 4 teams. Who do you think will win it? For you, do you think Leeds will win it?
Leeds will win it. Yeah, I think realistically they've been the standout team all season. So I think it's a race for second, really, with Burnley and Sheffield United, and looks like playoffs possibly for Sunderland.
Yeah, you spoke about Sunderland before. So I've seen you on different podcasts you've been on. You've been impressed with Sunderland this year, haven't you?
I have, yeah. Well, before this season, Sunderland were actually my very left field tipped for the Championship title, which nobody else kind of was on board with. So I'm a little bit, in some ways, I'm quite proud of how far that runner sort of has come, and they've assembled a great point tally this season. But again, I think it shows, it can be difficult if you don't have the parachute payments. You're in a different financial league, I guess.
You got fight for relegation as well, and it's going to hot up over the next couple of weeks. Luton trying to dig themselves out of it. It's unbelievable. They get relegated and end up in the bottom 3. I want Plymouth. For me, I love to see Plymouth stay up. I want Plymouth to stay up, really, because I love to go down there. I've not been down to Home Park for years. I like their manager, and I like what he's doing there. He seems like he's I've always enjoyed them as a club, and their fans are always decent when I've met them. I love to see them pull themselves out of it and stay in the Championship and build. But I think it's been difficult for them financially. They've not spent loads of money, have they? It's a great area for football as well, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly is. I'm just going to have a look at, because I suppose for a Southampton point of view, you'd want the southern clubs to still be in the Championship. So you'd want your Luton, possibly Cardiff, certainly a Plymouth Argyle to stay up, and maybe lose, say, a Derby, a Stoke, Hull. It's that you want the southern clubs. You'd have
potentially Portsmouth.
You'd have that Derby.
Yeah, that Derby could happen.
I don't think you'd say you want Portsmouth to stay up. You want them. You want them to go down.
I've got mixed feelings about it, really, because I'm like, It was interesting. I was on the podcast with Total Saints at the weekend, and we were saying the biggest problem with the Derby game, I don't know if you would agree with it, you almost end up with a situation where you're looking at the 3 or 4 games in the run up to it become a bit of everything's focusing towards the Derby game. And
It's
that could
almost
cause you
like,
big problem.
Martin, do you think it's almost like a competition in itself, the Derby game? Like almost like a league within a league, like those Derby fixtures? Because you
Yeah.
win a Derby, it's like it's everything to the fans, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it is, and that South Coast derby means so much, Gab. It's massive.
Mm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean, as a Birmingham City fan myself, I know how much these kind of derby games with the Blues Villa, how much it means to the people of the area. So, yeah, I think I mean, I don't know what you think, Martin. I wonder. I think the atmosphere at Fratton Park, if Portsmouth stay up when you have that derby, I think it's going to be really feisty.
yeah, it will be.
And yeah, so I think that's going to be a really tense game. I think,
It will be a
yeah,
tense game, and it's a cup final, isn't it? I think from a player point of view, you need everybody knowing what it means to the fans, what it means to people in each club. Because if you don't buy into that, and the players are playing like half-assed, like they have been in the Premier League, these players are like downing tools and not caring, not wanting to wear the shirt. I think you have a big problem then. So hopefully,
what's your contract situation for the summer? Have you got the scope to have a complete rebuild, or
I think it'd be difficult because you know they like to do business with. Walker Peters is out of contract, so here you go. Aaron Ramsdale has a relegation release clause in his contract. Here you go. So they'd both be out the door. Bednarek had Roma knocking on the door in January. They wanted to sign him. I think he'd definitely go in the summer. They sell him. Dibling's obviously not happy with his contract offer. Tottenham Hotspur circling around him, though he's not kicked on like I thought he would have done. I think
right?
it'd be nice to keep him, but look, his family be hearing the cha-chings. You know, there's money, big money being spoke around for him. So I think he'd go. But they will need a rebuild. They will need a rebuild. They've got players out on loan that will probably come back. Adozie being one of those. Ross Stewart's still finding his way back to fitness. They just can't get him fit. They don't have a recognised centre forward that's at this moment in time. Will Adam Armstrong is a question for you. Do you think he'd come back from share? He's out at West Bromwich Albion at the moment on loan. Will he come back and have the hunger to do it again for Southampton in the Championship? I'm not convinced. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I've always felt like Adam Armstrong. I don't know if he's an centre forward. I
No, he's
actually
not.
quite
No.
like him. I like him sort of as an inside forward off the left and kind of getting into goal scoring positions that way more than necessarily being slap bang down the middle. Yeah, they couple
Yeah,
of words like that.
It doesn't play well as a 9. He's not an out and out 9. He scored all his goals coming off the flank last year. To be honest, that's where he's at his best, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it's interesting though because I from a championship perspective, I don't see how like when I don't see these clubs as Premier League seasons. So often you come in, when you speak to fans of championship clubs going in, when they've just come down for the Premier League, they'll often say, "Oh, I can't bear these players. They didn't turn up, and they're lazy or what this, that, and the other." And then sometimes because they are of a certain level and they've been recruited for the Premier League, some of them end up being quite good for the Championship. Because it's a different level, so you might end up having that with a few of those.
Yeah, whoever comes in, they will need to back in with a bit of money. They're going to have to obviously create a bit of money by selling some players. It needs a rebuild. You need a lot of players out the door. Recruitment's not been good enough for a long time at Southampton. But Jonas Spores has come in. He's worked with Danny Rohl in the past summer. I'm not sure where, but they've worked together. I don't know loads about Jonas Spores, but he's coming in as sporting director. And obviously they know each other. So, yeah, they'd have to work pretty quick.
Having a sporting director model at Southampton, Martin?
I don't particularly like it, to be honest. I'd rather have somebody focus on our football club. They've got several football clubs, 3 football clubs that's been overseen, and I'm not convinced by that whole model. Really, I think as a football fan, you want focus on your club.
Right.
We bought players in the summer, then they went straight out the door on loan to one of the clubs within the group. I'm not a massive fan of it personally.
So just to clarify, is this sporting director going to also be involved with other clubs?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, okay. I think he's going to oversee the other 3 as well.
because I like the sporting director model, but not when they're focusing on multiple, because I don't see how you can really do that to the best of your ability. Like,
Yeah.
I think Watford have somebody who's also sporting director at Udinese. It's like, no, just why not just hire someone to focus on one club? That, yeah, not sure, that doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah. It's a big year next year. I'm looking forward to the challenge of going back, playing, winning games again. You've got to find a way to start winning games again, and hopefully don't do a Luton where you've kind of like got that mentality where everyone's on a bit of a downer, and you obviously they kept with the manager, didn't they? It could be totally different. Southampton, it'd be totally different than what we had under Martin. Whatever happens, it'd be a different style of football, wouldn't it? So yeah, it's quite exciting. Gab,
Yeah,
appreciate your
absolutely.
time. It's been brilliant to have
No
you on.
worries.
It's been brilliant. Go check this man out, Gab Sutton, that way. Go check him out. I'm going to leave all of his channel and social media handles in the show notes. Go give Gab a follow. Make sure you give the podcast a follow, because you will want to be tuning into it next season when the Saints are back in the Championship. Gab, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, Martin. Thanks for having me.